And so if you want to believe, if you literally want to believe that it's one way or the other, all you're doing is limiting yourself and making this buying into a belief that the divine is limited, and that the divine is not only limited, but the divine is limiting. I think the divine is like, hey, bro, go out and have a great time, experience it, go to Mars, go to the moon, meet that guy or that girl, dance, laugh, eat delicious food, lounge, soak up the sun, cry, sob in the bathtub or the shower by yourself because you have a broken heart. Taste it all because it all matters. And simultaneously, none of it matters.
Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, and tonight we have a really cool guest, which is PJ Dixon. PJ was diagnosed at birth with a rare form of muscular dystrophy, and he was not expected to live past age 7. That has not stopped him from becoming a snow skier, skydiver, amateur watercolorist, former wheelchair athlete, 18th degree, I'm sorry, 18th. I don't think it goes up to 18 degrees, 10th degree black belt, women's self-defense instructor, international traveler, published author, motivational speaker, success strategist, and self-professed advocate of love. So PJ is an old friend of mine. It's really great to have PJ here. We can probably go over quite a few subjects that I think will be of benefit to you guys watching tonight. So let's carry it on to PJ. PJ, how you doing?
Fabulous, brother. Fabulous. I just love, like, it's fun to hear my bio. It used to be like when I would hear my bio, it would be like, what? That's so crazy. I can't believe anybody, like, I've done all of that stuff. But now I've sort of let go of that part of my ego. And it's just fun to be like, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that. That's fun. I love that part about my life. And that's the cool part about living, right? Is that I believe now, for such a long time, I believe that, like, we're here because of karma. And I would believe that we are here because maybe, like, it's a classroom, it's an opportunity to learn. Maybe, you know, for a while, I believe that maybe God sent us down here for some particular reason. Now I just think maybe however we got here, by choice or karma or whatever, I think that we're just literally here to enjoy life. Like, we're here to smell the smells and taste the tastes and enjoy the experiences. If we're going to be here, why not have a blast? Why not have a good time? Like this morning, I was teaching martial arts to my martial arts guys, and we were doing rope techniques. And one of my students was like, "Hey, look what I just found." I was like, "Oh, that's really cool. Let's, like, wrap his hand up with that rope and twist it, you know, this direction really quickly, and it'll throw the knife back in the guy's face." And he's like, "No," and I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, boom, and sure enough, that knife went right back, you know, at the guy's face. So it's just fun exploration, right? Life is just, it's an exploration. It's an opportunity to have an adventure. I want everybody in their deathbed to do one of two things. One, say, "This was so amazing that I'm not ready to go yet." Or when they pass over to the other side, and if there's any kind of life review, for me, this is how I'm going to approach it. I'm going to be like, "God, that was amazing. We kind of go back." Because it was so much fun. Like, I want to go back. I want to stay. I want to live another 100+ years.
Now, PJ, this might be kind of cutting to the core of what might be on people's minds, which is, of course, how you're able to accomplish an extraordinary amount despite having muscular dystrophy. Which, when I hang around you, I mean, of course, it's been that is what your life is, and so when I'm around you, I don't even really realize you have a condition like that, right? And I feel like you are so adapted that to you it doesn't make a difference in any of your goals. So of course you're very well known in martial arts, which is amazing, but also travel. I saw you were in Japan not that long ago. So what do you think about people who are afraid to do things in their life that are outside of the box or that they feel intimidated by? And what can they learn from someone like you who's able to do all of that and not bat an eyelash?
Well, I think that everybody gets to have their own experience, first and foremost. That's really important, right? And so if there's something that you want to do, but you just kind of, like, you pull back and you're a little nervous, a little fearful, a little worried, you can hear the sound of my voice change, right? It sort of, like, gets a little higher pitched and, like, maybe sort of hesitant, like, I want to do that, but I'm just afraid. The problem is that they're lacking confidence. And I've been doing these confidence conversations for, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks or something like that, because I'm building a program called the Hero Project, helping people to develop their confidence so they can live the life that they want. And so if you look at what it is that you want and it's out there or out there, wherever it is, when you look, you're like, I really want to do that, but I'm just afraid, I'm nervous, I'm worried. There's one culprit. It's belief. Belief is the one thing that's holding you back. So if you can shift your belief, then you change your thinking. When you change your thinking, you change how you feel. How you feel changes the action that you take. The action you take changes the end result. So it starts first with like believing that you can or that you can't, and then starting to think about, okay, well, how do we change that belief? How do I change the feeling? How do I change the thinking in my head? Right? So it's conscious choice. So this is what it comes down to. Sorry, I get so excited. I love it. Right? It's a conscious choice. There are two different ways that we can look at the brain. There's multiple ways, but let's break it up to make it really super simple. I make a very, very clear distinction between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is what says, I want to do these things. The unconscious mind says, yeah, but what about all the fears and the worries and the doubts? The thing is that the unconscious mind is actually the best friend to the conscious mind when the conscious mind opens up to create a connection between the two.
Okay. And see if I can connect this with another thought possibly. So what do you think about then health? I mean, because it's really cliche in the new agey movements about thoughts manifesting reality and the law of attraction, stuff like that. I mean, typically I try to go at some of this from a slightly different angle or look at things a little bit more objectively. But like, for example, with you, what I see is in some ways your thoughts, ambition, and purpose in life sort of counteracted any physical condition that you have. And so I've been having a little bit of a crash course in that myself this year because I came down with a chronic illness.
Yeah.
And I noticed, the thoughts that I have, I do think it's directing to some extent my health and what I'm able to do. And I'm wondering if that's ultimately the solution to how I'll eventually, completely get better from, what I've been experiencing. So how do you kind of figure out to what extent your thoughts are manifesting reality, to what extent are physical boundaries stopping us from doing what we want to do?
So that's a really great question. And there's a lot of layers to it. And we could literally talk about this for hours. So I'm just going to share what is coming through me at this time. And I like to say coming through me instead of from me. So there might be times when I close my eyes and say, oh, give me a sec, because I want it to come through me and not from me. And what I'm doing is I'm listening for that sensation and that feeling. And when I see it or feel it, then I can speak what I believe in that moment is the truth. So in this moment, I want people to understand that there's a couple of ways we can look at this. We can look at it very pragmatically and practically, right? Which is, do you like how you're feeling right now? And if the answer is, I don't like how I'm feeling right now. And you can ask yourself, and you never ask yourself this question when you're excited, right? When you're like, life is amazing, everything's good. You never say, well, do I like how I'm feeling right now? You just keep having a good time. So if pragmatically and practically, if you're feeling like anxiety or nervousness or worry, and you're starting to feel uncomfortable, then you can simply ask yourself as quickly as possible, do I like how I'm feeling right now? And if the answer comes back, I don't, then the next question is very simple. What would I rather feel instead? And then as soon as you say, I would rather feel instead, your brain will go, or what would I rather feel instead? Your brain will say, well, I'd rather feel this and this and this. For me, my brain always gives me three things. Now, whoever's listening, their brain might say, well, I would rather feel this. And it might be one thing. But the thing is that because you'd rather feel it, the implication is that you've already felt it. And so since you've already felt it, think about that feeling, that sensation, that thought, that experience as being like a summer cottage that you visited over and over and over in your life. You don't need GPS to get back to it. You just have to go, oh, that's how I want to feel. And then you shift and you change into that position. You just shift your thinking, you let everything go. You go, well, this is how I want to feel right now. I can go back to feeling crappy and yucky and terrible in just a moment. But in this moment, I want to feel this, so I'm going to shift and feel that. So practically and pragmatically, if you don't like how you're thinking or how you're feeling, you can shift that way. Now, if we start to look at this a little bit more spiritually, give me a sec. Again, I want it to come through me, not from me. Give me just a sec. So spiritually, when we start to move into this law of attraction and manifesting and changing and healing, And granted, I'm a disabled guy. I'm in a wheelchair. I'm not walking. I haven't walked since I was 13 years old, but I was also expected to die at 7. And I do believe that because I want to live, I keep living. And so when you have a vision, you're like, well, that's what I want. I'm being pulled that way. I'm drawn that direction. Then I believe that the word desire, when you break it up into its two pieces, desire means of or from the Father. Okay. Now, I'm not being specific to any particular religion, but let's assume sire means God or the creator, the consciousness that is, the isness, whatever that is. And maybe there's a reason that is in you, right? In Buddhism, they talk about releasing desire because desire and the attachment to the desire is the cause of suffering. But if you say, that's what I want, and you actually get excited about it, when you move in that direction, what happens is you get filled with joy and excitement and enthusiasm for a particular subject and a topic, and your body gets energized. You can listen to it in my voice right now, right? When I say, well, that's what I want, that's exciting, that's fun, I love doing that. Yeah.
I really want to just draw on that real quick, because
Yeah,
actually we talk about afterlife topics. There's been a lot of debate. Well, usually debate that I've been bringing up to some people's annoyance, but I feel like it's worth talking about a lot. So I have a lot of respect for Buddhism. Even last year, I was actually teaching English to Dalai Lama's monks in India, right? And I was learning a lot about even their views of Tibetan Buddhism. And, so I have a lot of respect for Buddhism and I have a lot of respect for Eastern religion, but I also feel that there's this paradox that you just described really well, which is that some elements of Buddhism, they have a strong distrust of desire. And then I also see desire as being like this lifeblood that gives us energy and motivation and creative force. And then I've also seen some people going into Eastern religion whose personalities take on the consistency of bland oatmeal. And I feel like there's something going on here which is off kilter. And so from the perspective of spirituality, I'm still trying to figure this one out a little bit, because I kind of get the idea that excess desires can make people go crazy and get attached to all the wrong things. People who are materialistic and they're buying gold-plated bathtubs. But there's something about desire which we really, really need. So something I've complained about with the New Age movement is sometimes you hear people say things like, our goal is to merge with source consciousness and become desireless, egoless, floating around as orbs of light. So people who listen to my show, it's kind of ad nauseum. I go on about issues with those philosophies. So what's your take on that? How do we figure that out? Are there flaws? Because you have a lot of background in Eastern martial arts. You might know some things about this. How do we reconcile that?
Well, my degree is also in religions and cultures, mostly of the Far East and Latin America, right? So I think you're asking the right guy. I hope you're asking the right guy. So the thing is, the answer is it's everything and nothing, right? Yes, the release of desires creates a stillness in you. The letting go of attachments is requisite to free you up to what you want. The question is, what are you attached to, right? And are you attached to something and it's operating like an anchor and holding you down, or as you're moving forward, the line or the rope or the cord goes taut and jerks you backwards? I always say that the doors to your remarkable future, the doors to your remarkable future are in your past. What I mean is, picture a gigantic anchor dug into the ground, a gigantic ship anchor dug into the ground. And then what's attached to the anchor? Chains, right? Okay, or a chain. And so let's think about that chain or that rope or that cord or that line tied to the anchor. The anchor is your past. It's not going to move. It's not going to change. It is what it is. It was what it was. And that's not going to change. But what does change is the link that you still have to that, right? Or the link that it still has to you. And those chains tie into your brain, different parts of your memory. They tie into your throat. Like sometimes their voice was squelched when they were younger. Sometimes it ties into the heart or broken heart. Sometimes it ties into their guts, like it feels sick all the time. Sometimes it ties into their sex organs, right? So if they say, I want that, like that's what I want. Like I want to meet that person. I want to start a relationship with them. And we start to run towards it. And then all of a sudden, like we get jerked back into the past, like we're moving forward and everything is great. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, I can't do it because like, what if sexually I won't perform the right way? Or What if like I get there and the person, I don't know what to say. And as I start to talk, like my voice like shuts down and I feel stupid and embarrassed. So what's happening is the universe, your mind, your unconscious mind is like, remember I said earlier, it's your best friend. It's saying, hey, if you really like that person, if you really want that vision, if you really, there's something that you really are excited about, there's a link here, an attachment here that's holding you back from that. So let's, as we move forward and that line goes taut, boom, it jerks us and pulls us into the past again. So, but what happens is it also creates a flexibility in that chain. And so now we can stop for a minute and go, okay, I like that person, or I want that in my life, or I want to experience this, or I want to move there. And you go, what's holding me back? I feel it. Oh, let me analyze it and find it. Oh, it's in my brain. It's in this part of my memory. Okay, how can I let that go? You untie it, you unlink it, you let it go in some way. And then you don't have to do anything with the chain or the cord or the rope or the line or the whatever. You just, once you realize what the attachment is, you pull it out of your brain, you pull it out of your heart, you pull it out of your throat, you pull it out of your guts, you pull it out of your sex organs, whatever, and you just let it go. And then what happens is you've got this freedom to move forward even further until the next moment when you're pulled back. So to answer your question really quickly, I was saying that that within Buddhism, they say desires, the attachment to the desire causes suffering. It's not just the desire, it's the attachment to the desire. But here's the thing, stay with me for just a second. If you have desire, you're pulled forward. If you have enthusiasm and excitement, you're pulled into this. And you go, wow, okay, so I'm pulled forward. This is what I want. I get excited. When I get excited about that, now I have energy, I have life, I have vibration, I have intention. I have something that I can share with the world. I can make it better for people. But the problem is, it's the attachment to the unmet desire that causes problems. And so while there's value in letting go of all desires and sitting in stillness, right? So if I shift from this idea of desire, like over from the Father, that this desire is put into me for a reason, because it's going to be just fun, it's going to be joyful, it was something that I wanted, it's going to allow me to meet somebody, it's going to create a massive change in the world because I moved with this desire. There are times, everything and nothing, there are times when it's best to sit in pure stillness, just stillness, and let everything go. No attachments to what I want, to what I don't want, to what I'm getting, to what I have, just stillness, just presence. And what we're connected to is presence with a capital P, the lifeblood that is the divine flowing through everything, that is not necessarily God, but is the expression of the divine, that pure potential energy.
Do you think then the issue might be that there's like a lack of balance, in the sense that some certain
100%.
people may go on a path where they feel like, well, being in that stillness is what we need to do, to the exception of everything else. And then, so we should abandon everything else. Do you think that's good a path, or a not so good path?
Well, but don't you think that when people have that desire to let go of everything for, why? Because they want to reach enlightenment, right? So isn't that an attachment to enlightenment? And aren't they missing something? And Buddha said, take the middle path. Take the middle path. What do you enjoy? But don't lose yourself to it, right? If you don't get it, don't lose your mind and be like, oh, I didn't get it, my life is ruined.
So it's
Instead, go,
almost like it's a trap where people who are pursuing what they feel is enlightenment, they fall into, well, I guess there's like the spiritual ego traps where it's like, I'm more enlightened than everybody else. But I also think there might be a spiritual attachment trap where it's like, I have to achieve nth level enlightenment, so I'm going to renounce anything I've ever wanted in my life, because these are desires I'm going to just focus entirely on, which is a noble thing to do in some ways, giving up your belongings and backpacking or doing. I mean, I've done stuff like that personally, but I've seen it get taken to maybe an extreme level. But why I see that manifesting in the kind of spirituality or certain New Age sectors related to what we talk about here, which is life after death. And so sometimes we see a projection of life after death that relates to that concept of enlightenment. So when we ask certain people, what is it, where do you go when you die? They say, well, first of all, you achieve instant enlightenment, which means that all your material desires and things you ever wanted disappear and you join with God forever. And so one of the things that inspired me, for example, to write my first book is that I was seeing how that narrative was causing a lot of pain and distress and grief among lots of people in like the circles that I was involved in. And so that motivated me a bit, because then I began having sort of afterlife experiences that really contradicted that. So I almost feel like I wanted to get those answers from you, because I think you clarified a little bit about like the middle path. And so it's possible people are taking that to more of an extreme level and kind of projecting it into their esoteric philosophies, if that makes any sense.
Can I add real quick
Yeah,
before we
please.
go on? Okay, so I love what you're saying, right? If you move into like nth level of enlightenment, so I just reconnect and rejoin God, why were you ever supposedly quote unquote separated from God? Right? And
Yeah.
so if there was separation, did God say, hey, go forth, be fruitful, multiply, like they say in the Christian Bible, right? Was there a moment in, like in Kabbalah, where God retracted and pulled back and created a womb and allowed this space for free will? Why? And you want to go back and rejoin God. Why is he not allowing, why would he allow that only for you to come back? I mean, longer philosophical conversations, right? What if you are simply the expression of the divine? What if you are the very edge, the very cutting edge, the very fingertips, the very ends of the nerve system of the Godhead, of the divine? What if every experience that you had, like I'm tingling right now, what if every experience you had was an experience of God reaching out and evolving it and experiencing? And what if there were two consciousness, not one? Stay with me for a second. Even though there's one, there's also two, because even though there's non-duality, there's also duality. Let me say it that way. Okay. And so what I mean is, what if there was a divine consciousness? And then what if by creation or happenstance or whatever, there's also your consciousness? And so when you go out and you're like, oh, this feels good, this tastes good, this is a fun experience, I really enjoy this. And I don't mean hedonistically, but I mean like really like finding the balance of what's fun. That creates evolution. You're super excited and you're moving towards something. You're evolving, you're changing, you're shaping, you're experiencing things. Excuse me. And as you do that, you're evolving, and that sensation, that feeling goes back to the divine and goes, oh, this is great. Let's evolve in that way. That's fun. But when you find yourself in dark spaces, excuse me, sad, disappointed, frustrated, scared, you're not evolving. You're almost devolving. You're getting smaller. Now look, that's an evolution too. If there's an everything and a nothingness, there's an infinitely large and an infinitely small. And what you find is they're the same thing. When you get infinitely smaller and smaller and smaller, you pass through where you end up? Everywhere. Why? Because it's all one thing. And so if you want to believe, if you literally want to believe that it's one way or the other, all you're doing is limiting yourself and making this buying into a belief that the divine is limited, and that the divine is not only limited, but the divine is limiting. I think the divine is like, hey, bro, go out and have a great time. Experience it. Go to Mars. Go to the moon. Meet that guy or that girl. Dance, laugh, eat delicious food. Lounge. Soak up the sun. Cry. Sob in the bathtub or the shower by yourself because you have a broken heart. Taste it all, because it all matters. And simultaneously, none of it matters.
So that's probably is like maybe the main point that I've tried to articulate, and I think you articulated better than I have in, trying to figure these things out, which is that it is a limitless endeavor. And I just think that probably it's helpful to everyone to keep the limitless nature in mind, especially if someone, for example, God bless them, take on the role of, I want to be like a spiritual teacher. And I think some people do that, but maybe they're still in a limited way of thinking, and so that's what causes this kind of discordance that I've seen in communities. And so I think that
so
is
the problem. But the problem with that, right? When they say, I want to be a spiritual teacher, and I used to say that when I was a kid, people would say, PJ, you should be a teacher. And in my mind, I would say, yeah, but not that kind of teacher, meaning not a math, English, the history teacher. I knew I wanted to be a spiritual teacher, but I didn't know how. I didn't know those words. And then when I found Gandhi, and I was like, what? Gandhi was an attorney? in my mind, he was born as a spiritual teacher, right? And then when I found out at 14 that he was an attorney, I was like, what? This guy was a normal human being? And that means that I can do it too. And so the thing is the attachment to wanting to be the spiritual teacher instead of the gratitude for being a spiritual teacher. Maybe I just get to sit in gratitude, be so grateful that I have this connection, and not just this connection, but that I'm sitting in presence. And when I'm sitting in presence, maybe it's so delicious, presence with a capital P. And I always say this too. I say that people will talk about being present, right? They want you to be present. Don't worry about the past. You can't change the past. Don't worry about the future. It's unwritten, right? Just be present. But the problem is being in the present moment is limiting. Being in the presence, capital P, is liberating. And so what if instead of wanting to be the spiritual teacher, what if you were just simply grateful that you were having that spiritual experience, and in a delicious way, you just kindly and gently shared with other people, and by default, you became that spiritual teacher.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing to think about the past or look forward to the future.
No, it's not bad. But being present is limiting. It's limited by my 5 or 6 or 10 senses, depending on how you want to break them down. Being the presence with a capital P is liberating. And when I say in the presence, I can look across and see that tree, and I can recognize that the space between myself and that tree, there's no space there, because that same space between the tree and myself, when we get small enough, we realize that what's between myself and the atoms and the quarks and the smaller than the electrons and neutrons and protons, and there's something smaller than that and something smaller than that. What we find is that it's just empty space. And when we start to connect with that, and this, actually, I'm glad we're saying this, because I didn't want to forget this. When we connect with that empty space, we realize that the same empty space between me and the tree is the same empty space that's in me and in the tree. So there's no separation. It's all just empty space. It's all just one. Stay with me for 1 sec, okay? Let me just say this one more thing. And you asked a question about referencing the ailment that you had and law of attraction and stuff like that. There's a process. There's a number of meditations that can be done that will take you back to this space, and then take you back even just slightly before this concept of space, like physical space, right? Into the space of pure potential where nothing is written yet. Some might refer to it as the void. And it's when we return to this void that there's a possibility of reboot. And when we get into the space, we can reboot. And when we're born back into this physical space, we can bring back some of the healing as a result of that. Now, I could argue with myself and say, well, great. If that's the case, then why does Deepak Chopra, who always talks about it, the way you think, is going to be the way you heal, Why does he have gray hair? Why is he portly now? Why is he wearing glasses? Right? Why, if PJ is talking like this, why is he still in a wheelchair? Honestly, because I think none of us have really, truly 100% dedicated, like Buddha, for example, to that kind of healing. But I do believe that it's possible. Why couldn't it be possible?
There was that Turkish yogi guy he must have passed away by now, because he was in his mid-90s when I was reading about him 6 years ago. But he, maybe he hasn't. I don't know. But I do know he was quadriplegic, and then he became a yoga master. This guy out of Turkey, and he's very, very, very agile in his 90s, and so so that means that is somebody who commits to that level. It may be possible, and we go into some of those stories, which probably is a very different topic. But I want to ask a couple things, because I have a couple more subjects I want to bring up with you.
Let's do it. I love it.
So the next subject I wanted to bring up involves basically like inner child work, right? So personally, I've touched on this a little bit, like in my books, but to harken back to what we were discussing, I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm a spiritual journalist, right? So I'm not so much around to give life advice, although some people do feel that like some of the work that I do helps them, and that's great. But so I'm not one to try to say how necessarily to get in touch with the inner child, but I will say that it's kind of a secret weapon of my own, I think, that has led to some level, besides what I've gone through this year, which is kind of like a bullet that came out of nowhere. Typically, I think my health is really good, and I even have like kind of like a youthful vigor about me that I maintain, and I think that's because of staying in touch with my inner child. So even if there's things from when I was a child that people say, oh, you should forget and stop thinking about that. If you like this book that's meant for fifth graders, you should throw it out the window because you're an adult now. Like I've never bought into that kind of stuff. I try to stay connected to when I was a child, and I just do that naturally. I don't really know how I do it, but I do know it really helps me in my life. So I know you've talked a lot about this subject. So what do you think about that? And are there any ways that people can, let's say someone who is, has a lot of wrinkles under their eyes, and they work a couple jobs, and they have screaming kids at home, and they pretty much are as far from having a youthful vigor towards life as possible. How do you help someone out like that? Are there any pieces of advice that might give them some opportunity to reconnect with, I guess, the more pure state of being?
Yeah, I think the fact that you said reconnect to a more pure state of being is more than likely the most important piece of this, right? And let's look at this too. So many times when people think about the inner child, we think about the inner child as a separate piece of ourselves, I want you to hear that. We think about it as different than who I am, right? And sometimes that inner child has been hurt. And sometimes that inner child is like, hey, I just want to come out and play and read that fifth grade book with you again. Or, that book for 5-year-olds again, or whatever. One of my favorite books is Hands, Fingers, Thumbs. And it's an old book that was sort of like a Dr. Seuss book, but it was written by somebody else. And it's just super fun. My sister still loves it. I'm 51. I love it. I would sit down at 51 and let my mom read that book to me because it just brought so much joy to me. And so the best way to reconnect with your inner child is to start to slow down. Because when I said earlier that your unconscious mind is the best friend to your conscious mind, where in the world does the inner child live? If it's not a separate being, where does it live? It's in our unconscious mind, right? And the thing is that there's a distinct difference between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And the bridge to that is the subconscious mind. And so if I think about the subconscious mind like a bridge, think about the subconscious mind as like sort of percolating. It's like coffee, like percolate. It's like bubbles up. And if you slow down, right, that person with the wrinkles and the crazy kids and the busy schedule and all that, you need time for yourself. Everybody does. Everybody needs a little downtime. Even if that means your partner is there with you, you need to be able to shut down and go inside and reconnect and realign. And once you reconnect and realign, there's that presence there. And when that presence is there and you let it fill you up again, there's the awareness of who you are on the whole, on the grand scale. And so when you start to listen, you let your unconscious mind start to go quiet and you start to move yourself from the crazy, chaotic mind, and I can talk about this too, into a place where your mind starts to get a little more quiet and you find a stillness in your being. Now what's happening, and you're starting to listen, like what's bothering us? What are we thinking about? And I notice I'm saying we, because I'm incorporating the unconscious mind. And what happens is you'll start to get like little pieces of wisdom. I even teach people in meditation to sit with a pad of paper and a pen or pencil. And when you're in meditation, if you have a thought that you're running over and going over, when you have this wisdom, just briefly open your eyes, pick up the pen or pencil, write it down. Don't write the whole thing, just write enough notes that it'll remind you. And as you set the pencil pen down, close your eyes and come back into the meditation. Don't leave the meditation just because you turn a sitting meditation into a moving meditation by writing. Keep the same state. And then give me a sec. I got myself off track.
Yeah, no worries.
Right, inner child. Okay. So it's not separate from you. So what happens is that you start to listen from the conscious level, the unconscious mind wants to speak to you. And when it wants to speak to you, what it does is it bubbles up, and that becomes the subconscious mind. And as soon as the bubbles pop, you go, oh, I get it. Oh, epiphany. Oh, I understand. Oh, that's where it came from. Oh, that's why I feel like this. Oh, when I was 5 years old. Oh, when I was 12 years old. Oh, I do want to feel more joy. Oh, I'm scared because of the way that I was treated as a child. When these pieces of wisdom start coming up, this is what people refer to as your inner child talking to you. It's a part of your unconscious mind that's saying, hey, we sort of roped this area off. We quarantine this area. We pull this area like out just to keep you safe. But since you seem to be open and receptive, it wants to talk to you again. And so can you listen? And as you listen, you start to join and create connection. It's this communication, right? Think about C-O-M-M, right? This like connection, and then unification, right? Like communication is this idea of coming together through conversation. So if there's a coming together, it's this unconscious and conscious through the subconscious, the inner child joining the present you and reconnecting to this wholeness of who you are. And so
a big part of that is the imagination, I think, because so like when you're a kid, something I was musing on recently was it's so interesting. When I was a kid, if I had some action figures, then the environment around me became this huge world, right? So like whatever, like this backdrop behind me would be some great castle or something. And it would, it was all this stuff was connected automatically. And I was always thinking about things in that space. And sometimes I think back about how much like ability I would have today if I still had the ability to do that. And I do a little bit if I'm writing fiction, but I still haven't gotten my fiction books out there yet. So obviously not as productive as I could be, but I just think about that level of imagination that I had when I was 9 years old and how that really there was just a cutoff point when I was maybe 12 or 13 years old. And like all that just, it was cut off. I'd never pick up an action figure again. Right. And I don't know. I just think that there's something that gets cut off. And if there's a way to reconnect that a little bit in some way, I think it would be really beneficial to everybody, but I don't know.
I would change the language. I would disagree and say this, it's not cut off. Okay. It's released. And so instead of having a tautness between you and the action figure, for example, or you and the memory of the toy that you used to play with or the imagination that you used to have, it and that being a taut connection, as we found other things also interesting, right? We just sort of released it a little bit. And the tautness between us and the action figure, us and the imagination of our childhood is released a little bit. It's not gone. It's just released. It's just given its own space to just sort of float and wait until we're ready to pick it up and play with it again. I like to encourage adults to regain their innocence, right? Innocence is so overlooked. And as adults, what happens if you regain innocence? There's peace, there's joy, there's play, there's forgiveness, there's curiosity, there's wonder. If you want to recapture the imagination, start with curiosity and then add one thing, right? Like this just came to mind. What if you're sitting in your backyard and you're looking at the trees and the leaves, excuse me, and you're like looking at the colors and the shapes, and then you incorporate one thing. You're like, well, what would happen if I was that small? What would happen if I was a fairy and had wings and I was the size of the leaf? What would I do? And then all of a sudden, like my mind, like, look, what would I do? The mind, it's the question you ask, right? So when I say, what would I do? Immediately my mind was like, oh, dude, I'd be flying in and out of the branches, up and around, just going as fast as I could, because why? It would be fun, right? Like in Star Wars, there was the pod races, and now we have drone races through the woods. I would totally do that with little wings, right? And I didn't know I was going to say that, but why did it come out? Because I asked the question, what would I do? What would I do if? So it's just this idea of having this innocence and not thinking, well, no, I'm an adult and I have to read adult books and I have to, pay the bills and I have to go to work and I'm not allowed to smile and laugh and play and be ridiculous and silly. No, you are. You just have this height attachment to this particular way of being because somehow you've been programmed to believe that this is how adults are. Is it? Like, look at how I'm talking. I'm ridiculous on stage when I'm speaking from stage. I'm crazy like this. When I'm coaching one-on-one with my clients, I'm crazy like this. When I'm talking to groups, I'm crazy like this. But sometimes I'll shift and I'll come right back into my confidence. You hear the tone of my voice change. Now, that's not me making that up. I just shifted out of the imagination of my head and the playfulness up there in my head back into my body, and I became very focused and present. I can do both. Why? Because they all exist within me. I speak to my mom differently than I speak to my grandmother. I speak to my grandmother differently than I speak to my sister. I speak to my sister differently than I speak to Cyrus. Why? Because they're all different people, but it's all part of who I am. I have all of this to move with. It doesn't make me out of integrity. It makes me full of integrity.
And that's why, as a kid, you actually have to learn to speak differently to your grandma because you're a little bit, you're not balanced yet, right? So you haven't
Right.
found the middle path like we talked about earlier, right? So,
Well, do you have to learn to speak to your grandmother, or is it that we're being programmed? Are we being taught within society, within our family, this is how we do it, right? Or does your grandma just say, "Oh my God, you're just so crazy as a kid. I love it," right? But people teach us how to treat them. So your grandmother probably taught you how to treat her, and then mom and dad and everybody else said you treat her like this, you don't treat her like that, right? Society says this is the right way. Men shouldn't swear in front of women because we should treat women in a particular way. That's fine. Like, if that works for you, that's okay.
it is true. My grandmother was kind of like this exalted figure when I was a kid, and I was told, by my father all the time, okay, you have to revere your grandmother, basically. And my grandmother, and she did have this great matriarchal presence, but it turned out she really, she was really like um, wanted, just to hang out casually and really didn't want any of that. So it is funny how that goes sometimes. But anyway,
Yeah.
I want uh, so I do want to open up to patrons to ask you some questions. I think we will go a little bit over time.
Dude, let's do it. I'm open and free. I love it.
Because I didn't get to the other topic yet I wanted to bring up, which was, so, as you know, so we do talk a lot about like real, like spiritual experiences and connections to the other side and things that happen to us. So I wanted to ask you if you've had any experiences that are noteworthy that you'd like to talk to us about, in terms of, well, I guess whatever things may have happened to you. Has there been an experience in your life that stands out on a spiritual or supernatural level?
I could talk about this for days, but let
Okay.
me share one thing that I don't share a lot, but I have started sharing more over the past few years. And it's going to seem a little contradictory to what I said earlier. And when I throw up the contradiction, I'll tell you where I am with it. Okay. And let everybody else chime in if they'd like. So I was sitting and reading a book on world religions 22 years ago or something, right? And I was reading about Zoroastrianism. And for whatever reason, a word or a sentence or something, give me a sec. I want it to come through me, not from me.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. I want it to be as authentic as possible.
And there's a lot
I
of
was
Zoroastrianism is a really interesting path, by the way. But anyway, go.
it is quite fascinating. So as I was reading, all of a sudden, I left my consciousness, I left my body, I left the book, I left the room that I was in, and I would say that it wasn't even that I left; it was that I was having a vision. I just ceased. That time, that space, that book ceased to exist because the only moment that existed was the present, and I woke up during creation. And when I say I woke up during creation, if you think about eggs in a basket, not in a basket, I'm sorry, like in like one of those styrofoam cases. When I woke up during creation, I woke up, my consciousness woke up, I came online, and I realized that in front of me, everything around me was sliding towards this great abyss. And as we were slipping towards this great abyss, I was seeing these souls, okay, that looked like the shape of eggs in a sense, were slipping into the abyss. And many of them hadn't woken up yet. Like I had already woken, I was already conscious. And what I did is I reached out as far as I could with my right arm, like my energy in that side of me, as far as I could reach. And you could reach far, right? So it's not like the same distance, like, oh, I might be able to driving my car and we stop fast and I put my arm over in front of the passenger in the front seat just to sort of hold them back. You can reach far. I could reach far, and I reached as far as I could because with everything in me, I wanted to hold these souls back who hadn't woken up yet, from slipping into the abyss. And I didn't know what was going on. It was pure chaos and pure confusion. And it felt like, you know how bumblebees, when they sting, and their stinger has a barb at the end of it. So when they sting, it tears their guts out, right? Because the barb is attached inside there. So it literally rips their guts out. And that's what it felt like. It felt like we'd been ripped or torn from God. And it was excruciatingly painful. And we were slipping towards this abyss. And I was awake. And all I knew in that moment was enough love to reach out and hold them back as best as I could. I didn't know anything else. I didn't know why I was conscious. I just knew that it was excruciating to be torn from the breast of God.
What do you think this abyss was? Why were souls who were not even awake yet being doomed to enter an abyss? And before people watching begin freaking out and taking Xanaxes because they're now worried that this is our existential fate after we die or something, which I don't think that's what you're saying at all.
No, not at all. No. Remember, because I was talking about creation.
So what is this abyss? Because I don't believe in non-existence. So what do you think this abyss could be?
I've really fell into it a lot. And if we look at Christianity, Christianity would say the separation, the fall, right? That Lucifer left God, and then that created the tearing. And when the tearing occurred, these souls spilled out. And as they spilled out, what happened really was there was this awareness of free will, right? And so there's this spilling out of souls into the area that within Kabbalah, you heard me mention earlier. Excuse me. Within Kabbalah, you heard me mention earlier that the idea that God retracted and created a womb. So it wasn't just one-sided. It was in essence like a womb. But he didn't see over on the other side. It just knew that that everything I was seeing here wrapped all the way around whatever this abyss or darkness was. And I think this abyss or darkness was just empty space that now was open to be impregnated with dreams and goals and aspirations and trials and tribulations and decisions about returning to the connection with God. And I think this is why people lean so heavily on prayer and meditation and seeking enlightenment, because they're trying to return to God.
Okay, so the abyss is where we exist now, potentially.
The abyss is the initial canvas that where we exist now is created in. Does that make sense?
Because some people have near-death experiences, for example. Many of them are very on the positive spectrum, but some people, and I think we were just talking about this a week ago, have had experiences with the abyss. And it's similar to what you're describing. And sometimes it is a negative experience. And so this has caused debate among, when we debate and talk about near-death experiences, is like, what is that abyss that people, because a lot of times it's like people who have the NDE, they either encounter the light and it's like all-encompassing love or source consciousness, or they go to an environment which we would call an astral environment. So they go to a city made of crystal, or a beautiful field, a garden, they meet their deceased loved ones. But then there is that the abyss experience as well. So do you think that this is like shown to you or people as a metaphor? Or do you think it's something that's literally happening?
I would rephrase it slightly and say it's something that happened. Now, we get into wrestling match over whether time exists or doesn't. Is everything happening all at once? Consequently, that's still happening right now. But I would say it was both literal and metaphoric, because it's the everything and the nothing. The metaphoric aspect, the literal aspect is that there was nothing there, right? God retracted from God to create empty space for free will to create, and finger painting for the innocent souls. But it was also, I don't remember this as much as I don't remember visually as much as I remember feeling it, when I said it was chaos, it's because there was war happening in the abyss, like between dark and light, between evil and good. And so the metaphoric aspect, let me say this, is that every moment there's an abyss in front of us. But I wouldn't say an abyss, I would say every moment there's a blank canvas in front of us. Every moment there's a blank slate. Every moment we can choose the color that we want to paint on that canvas, right? Every moment there's a new experience, a new opportunity. Every moment there's a chance for rebirth. And so instead of looking at the quote unquote abyss, and forgive me for the word, but it's the best word from my experience. And everybody gets scared of that word. Now, I don't want to fall into an abyss, but it's an abyss because we don't, as in our conscious mind, we don't see an end to it. We don't see a bottom to it. We don't see walls to it. There's just nothingness. And remember, we talked about everything, God, nothingness, no God, but nothingness is still God. And that's the thing that we get to realize. And through my own prayer, give me 1 sec, through my own prayer, through my own meditation, through my own walk, give me 1 sec. I'm going to just let it flow through me. We get to fill that abyss, paint in that abyss the love of God. And this is so funny. Remember in Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, when Luke is on Dagobah and he's about to walk inside that tree, and Luke says to Yoda, "What's in there?" And Yoda says, "Only what you take with you." Right? So it's the same idea. What are you taking into that abyss? Right? And so I was fortunate enough that I was conscious and I was taking the love of God and the love of other souls, of other beings, of other light, that I didn't want them to suffer. So I was taking that desire and that love in with me. And so, but evil was taking anger and frustration and sadness. So the abyss is, give me a second, there's a word coming. The abyss is the moment, the millisecond before birth. It's the moment right before consciousness, right before birth, right before choice.
Okay, so it's a blank canvas, or a metaphysical blank canvas. So it really depends.
The only thing that exists in there is what you take in with you.
It depends.
I've never said those words.
Spiritual maturity and self-development level, almost, or ability to understand their connection to source, to be able to go into the abyss, and then there's not an issue. And maybe the thing that you were upset about in that experience was the concept of souls going into that abyss, but they're not ready for it. And that's the origin of what we might even think of as evil, right? Because people, souls, end up in that abyss, and now there's disconnection, and then they just spiral into self-centered behavior, or they spiral into darkness, and they're not bringing with them what they're supposed to be bringing with them. So that's what I got, but maybe that's incorrect. I don't know.
I wouldn't disagree with it, but I would also add to it that what I was holding them back from is falling into darkness and not being awake and being able to make a choice of their own. They were innocent, and it was my effort to hold them back so that they didn't fall innocently and blindly and unawakened into the abyss. However, is that where evil is? Well, again, it's what you take with you. But what I would say is that in that space, when they fall in there innocently and they wake up in the abyss, I would say that it's more, you could spiral into all the negative that you mentioned, or you could just simply like find your life in confusion and depression and a sense of loss and a sense of disconnect, which is what you did say, if I remember correctly. So there's more of these feelings, like I feel disconnected, I feel confused, I feel like lost, I feel like I'm depressed, I don't know who I am, I don't know where I'm going. It's because they weren't awake in that moment to choose God or to choose evil, and they're confused by all the distractions of the world, and yet there's something empty inside of them that's not full. And so it's in this space when they return to the connection of spirituality, of divinity, of the presence, that they start to fill up. And when they start to fill up with that, now they have a choice. Now they have options. But before they fill up with that, they feel disempowered. And when they feel disempowered, that's where the depression, the confusion, the sadness, the sense of loss, the sense of disconnect comes from, because there's no power there. And even if there was power there, they don't know how to use it. And so when they're filled up with presence, all of a sudden they go, wow, like I have a choice? Yeah, you have a choice, of course. You always had a choice. You just weren't aware of it. You just didn't know it was there.
So so it's kind of like that experience is a macro perspective of sort of what you're doing on a practical level when it comes to self-development, when it comes to helping people get back on their path. Maybe it's something like that, looking at the macro perspective. So I want to real quick.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
I think we're going to wrap up kind of soon and shift to the patrons, but I want to mention, I'll throw a curveball. Have you ever had like a out of body experience where you're in some other world, or an astral projection type of experience? Have you ever had anything like that?
You mean aside from leaving my physical body and having the vision?
Having the cosmic experience. Have you ever had a more like grounded experience? It's like, well, I'm floating around and.
Oh, yeah. Of course. Absolutely. Yeah. I had to think about it for a minute. But there was a time when I was practicing some astral projection like stuff. We called it dreaming body. And this is a fun story. And so I'm at a spiritual retreat with my spiritual teacher, and he's taking us through dreaming body, which is basically an astral projection kind of thing. And afterwards, when we come out of it, he says, okay, well, like I'm going to interview or like debrief everybody one at a time. And so when it was my turn, I went back and he said, okay, so what was your experience? And I said, well, remember when you rung the bell at the beginning? And he said, no, I don't ring the bell at the end. And I said, no. Remember, you rang the bell in the beginning to sort of symbolize that it was time to start, and then you rung it at the end to wake us up. And he smiled, and he said, I only rang it once at the end. I said, no. In the beginning, you rang it once, right? And then you rang it at the end. And he just smiled, and he sort of touched me on the arm, and he said, I rang it once at the end. So what's that teaching me? It's teaching me the circle thing. And there's another really cool time when I was in a sweat lodge with the same person. And this, what's fascinating to me is when I climbed in. So the sweat lodge is usually open to the east. So I climbed in, and you go clockwise. So I went, where's that? East. Hold on, I got to go in my head. So I was sitting on the south side, right, of the sweat lodge. And my one of my best friends was sitting on my left side. So he went in first, I went in after him. So he and I were both on the south side. There were a couple people still on my right side. And the spiritual teacher had gone in first. So he went all the way around, full circle, was sitting by the door on the other side, right? And so they opened up the flap at one point and let somebody out, shut the flap again. And when we were in there, we were singing, drumming, doing the whole thing. When they opened up the flap again, the door wasn't on my right side anymore. The door was on my left side. I had gone from the south side to the north side. And I was telling my friend, the guy that was sitting on my left, I was like, hey, bro, do you remember like several years ago when this happened? This was a crazy thing. And I know you're going to think that I'm ridiculous, but this was my experience. And then they opened the door and the door was on the left side. And he goes, oh my God. He goes, I had the same thing. He said, you were still on my right side. I was like, you were still on my left side. He said, but the door when we went in was on our right side. When we came out, it was on, he said, when we opened the door again, it was on my left side. And I was sitting right next to the spiritual teacher. I was like, I know, that's so crazy. I had the same experience. So it was fascinating. Like, it's just juicy and delicious when these things happen like that, because you go, hold on, my idea and concept of reality just got shifted. I have so many tingles up and down my spine and in my brain right now because of that, because it's that idea of there's nothing as tangible as you think it is. Everything is empty space. Now, can I walk through a wall? Not yet, but I imagine if I practiced hard enough, I might be able to do something pretty miraculous, but
it's always like a gold mine when you have a verifiable experience like that. That's why I wanted to ask you that, because I know you've had so much background in that type of thing. So I want to kind of leave things on an interesting note, that a quick story you might find interesting. You know about the late Sean Stevenson, right?
Yeah, of course. Sean and I had a lot of similar friends.
And And if people don't know, so Sean Stevenson, also a gentleman on a wheelchair, and in a similar note, also I think he wasn't supposed to live past age 3 or 4 or 5, if I recall. But
Right.
but he was really driven by a lot of purpose, and and a really great guy. I mean, you can go pull up his lectures on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can just open a new window, pull up his lectures. It's always really great stuff. But anyway, so like you, Sean knew friends of mine, and of course Sean passed away last year, or was it this year?
It was a couple years ago, actually.
I think it was.
I think it was 18.
Or was it?
Might have been 19, but I think it was 18.
I think it was 19.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sean passed away, unfortunately, and not long after he passed away, I had an astral projection experience.
Oh, cool.
Where I was in a kind of like nightclub environment, and everything good on your end? Are you comfortable?
Yeah, I'm just moving around. I squirm a lot because I'm never quite comfortable in my own skin. But I'm listening to everything you said.
Oh, no worries. All right.
So
I had this experience where I was like in a nightclub, and I was with Sean Stevenson, and he was still 3'8" or however tall he is, but he was not on a wheelchair. He was perfectly mobile.
Oh, cool.
And I also, in that same environment, was my friend Jordan. Jordan, right?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so there was Jordan there, and then his wife was there too, and they were both kind of out of it, which is sometimes what happens to people who are living in this world but are projecting into that world in like a dream. So they think it's a dream, but they're kind of out of it. But I'm awake because I'm having like an astral experience. And then I was there with Sean, and so I was talking to Sean and looking at Jordan, and then Sean was saying Jordan would never believe this was possible.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
Sean said that it won't even be worth trying to tell Jordan that you had an experience with me and Jordan there, because he's completely in his he's kind of like a materialistic dude, and he wouldn't believe this was really happening. But whatever, let's just have fun anyway. Now that he's here, I'm like, yeah, for sure. And so I was having that conversation with Sean as he was walking around, and then Jordan was there as well. It was like a nightclub, or something, like an astral nightclub. So I thought this was a really interesting experience. It happened not too long after I learned that he passed away. So and of course Sean went from now he was in like pretty great like health, and I thought that was an interesting experience. I just wanted to throw that out there before we wrap up.
What's funny is, just as you started to tell the story and you said we've got some other friends, and I immediately thought of Jordan, right? And I was like, I know that Jordan would never buy into this. And you tell the story, and you're like, Jordan, Sean was like, yeah, Jordan would never buy into this. I was like, that's exactly what I was thinking. Because that's, Jordan is very practical, very pragmatic, very tangible, very, intellectual. So, but still fascinating that it was the same. I knew that that's where you were going to go with that. Super fun. I love that.
Yeah, and it just makes me think, because my gears always turning in regards to like the afterlife and what people are doing over there, and how that relates to some of us who are alive here, and we're like dreamers, just like wandering that plane of existence, and what people who have fully passed on or fully moved into that dimension, like how they sometimes look at us. And also the issue, and that really made me think also about the issues of people who, even though we all love Jordan, but if you're too attached to like left brain materialism, then it's kind of funny that it was like, well, let's tiptoe around Jordan in this astral state with us so that we don't put him off, because he'll just deny that any of this could ever be real. And so we were just having a laugh about that. So that experience has really stuck with me among like astral experiences I've had. So I know, so
anyway. So funny.
Okay, with that said, I want to go ahead and turn it over to the patrons. But before we do that, I will mention real quick, if you're watching this on YouTube, you are watching Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. I hope you have enjoyed this discussion with PJ Dixon. And if, of course, you want to become a patron yourself and be able to ask questions to guests like PJ and support the work we do over here, you can head over to patreon.com/Afterlife Topics, the $30 level. You can join us here in the VIP groups, or also at afterlifetopics.com/university is a way to get involved with that as well. Or just hitting the subscribe button, liking the video. Of course, that's free and it helps keep this little channel going. With that said, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to the patrons to see if anyone has any questions for PJ. So you can raise your hand or write in the chat, or just jump in and start talking, but I'll pick out someone, whoever wants to go first. So does anyone have any questions for PJ? There's a bunch of you here. I'm sure someone has a question. Or
Yes.
Okay, great. Sunday, hiya.
Hey, how are you? Hi, PJ.
Good.
Thanks for
Hi, Sunday.
the chat. So I have a couple questions, but I'll just kind of do one at a time to give other people a chance. But you mentioned the void, and it's hard to describe. Have you been to the void? So you kind of mentioned starting in the void, and that there was meditation that you knew of to get you to that place.
Yeah.
If you can give Cyrus or us the information on that meditation that you know of, and how can we get there, and what do you find there?
So I want to respond to what you're saying. And as far as sending something to Cyrus, one of the easiest and best places to start is with some of Joe Dispenza's meditations. His most common one is paying attention to the space between your ears, between these different parts of your body. And he's taking you back, taking you back, taking you back. And that's the easiest place to start with something like that, because it's really easy to find on YouTube. And his meditations are very inexpensive. And he's basically taking you back to a place where you can reboot and start moving forward. I was doing some of that long before I heard about Joe Dispenza. And so when you ask the question, have I been to the void? Well, that's sort of a Zen riddle, right? How do you know when you are in meditation, right? The Zen Buddhist would say, you don't. Because if you know you're in meditation, you're not in meditation, because you're attached to here and not everything. You've let everything go, and you're connected to the non-duality, to the oneness, to the everything. So my experience of returning to a space like that is, when I go back, the one thing that I can say, the two things that I can say is, I want to say three. The two things that I can say is, right now as I'm talking to you, it's like pure light. And when I say it's pure light, think about the light like pure potential. Think about it like the quantum energy field. Okay, this is a scientific way to explain it. It's this quantum energy field, and the reason that it's light is because it's energy, right? And so inside of this space, nothing exists but pure potential. And so it's a little bit like dipping a cup into a pond and pulling out the water, and the water comes out in the shape of the pond, or in the shape of the cup that you dip in there, because the water has pure potential to take the shape that you want. The other thing is that the consciousness that I have experienced in this space it's vast, right? It's like, you see me looking off, but I'm looking off because I'm remembering the moments and the sensation, and it's the sensation of it's the sensation of floating in everything and nothingness. So you're not floating. It's not your body, Sunday, that's floating. It's not your mind that's floating. It's that there's no attachment. And so everything is floating. Everything is, I'm going to say it, it's going to sound weird. Everything is float. Everything is floating. But nothing is floating because nothing is there. So how do I explain this? Give me a sec. And yet, okay, so let me add to it instead of explain that. And yet everything is conscious. So in that space of pure potential light, everything is conscious and everything is aware, but nothing is attached. So it's pure life, and there's movement in there, but it's simultaneously still. And the movement is flow, that nothing is attached, but the stillness is that nothing exists. So there's nothing to move. I hope it didn't confuse you.
No, I appreciate it. And in
Yeah.
your meditations, you've gotten there in your meditations?
Yeah, so if I explain my meditation really quickly, this one particular meditation that I basically created on my own because I wanted to go back, and I was just in exploration. So what I do is I take people from their head. So if you're in your head, and most of us are in our head a lot, I talk about just settle, just to allow your body to settle, or allow your consciousness and your awareness to settle out of your mind, and then through your jaw, through the muscles around your ears, and down your neck and your chest and your body. So just settle into your body. And once you've settled into your body, then what I have people do is I say, okay, now when you're settled in your body, that includes your head, like physical head, not just your mind. When you settled into your body, now start to feel, can you feel some semblance of energy around or in your body? Can you see that or feel that there's something extra to the physicality? And it's just like maybe just a little energy, maybe just a little, like there's some kind of life there that you can feel. And as you feel that life, allow yourself to start to float in it, like as if you're lying down in a stream or a pool and you're just floating on your back. So allow yourself to just sort of float, your consciousness to start to float in that energy. And as you float in that energy, you realize that you start to become the energy. And so then what you want to do is you want to start being aware that you're looking at smaller and smaller parts. So you go from your physical body, and then you look at your skin, and then you look at your muscles, and then you look at your bones, and then you look at your internal organs. And then you go, well, what's smaller than each one of those? What's smaller than those? How are they staying connected? And what's smaller than that? And so it's this process of like getting smaller, and what's smaller than that, and what makes that up. But you don't use your brain with it. You're actually using your sensation. Just so think about your brain like the part that's the thinker versus the part of your brain that's the observer. Okay, so you're shifting from the thinker part of your brain, or I am. And when I teach my clients, I shift from the thinker part of my brain to the observer, the just simple awareness. And then what's smaller than that, and what's smaller than that, and then what's smaller than the atoms that make you up, and what's smaller than the protons and electrons and neutrons that make those up, and then what's smaller than the quarks that make those up, and then what's smaller than the sub-Newtonian, I think Newtonian level, something like that. What's smaller than that? And what I'm getting people to do is shift and settle back into nothingness, into everythingness. And when you get to this space, there's a presence, there's an awareness, there's a consciousness. And it's, if you're still with us, that's one of the last things to let go. And you just literally let go, and just everything. It's like this is a funny way to say it, but this is the vision that's coming. It's like sand through a cheesecloth, right? All of a sudden you just let go and you just slip through. And then there's not an awareness or presence anymore. There's just the isness. And if you are aware or present, you're not quite there yet. So when you slip through that, that cheesecloth, that last little thing holding you up, and you slip through and you realize that you're just part of the everything and the wholeness, there's a natural breath that occurs as you go in. It's like the breath that occurs when you go in, when you take a baby underwater, they take a breath before they go under. It's just a natural instinct. So there's a breath that occurs in your spirit as you shift into that space, and you breathe in this world. And then as you just go to the other side, you breathe in the other side, up below the cheesecloth. What a weird way to say it. But below the cheesecloth, you breathe in just a little bit of that. So everything in there becomes everything inside of you too. And then it's in that space where you just float and heal. And it's when you return and you come out of that what starts to heal first is your thinking in your mind. So that change of the thinking in the mind allows for the body to then follow suit. So if we don't clean and wash the mind first, we can't expect the body to ever follow. How is that? Did that make sense?
That's awesome. Yeah, I have gotten many, many times to what you're referring to as the cheesecloth part, but I can never, one time spontaneously, before I knew about any of this stuff, it happened, but I can never see, I get stuck every single time at that cheesecloth. For whatever reason, I have not learned how to let that last part go. Whatever that is, I'm
It's
stuck
fear.
there.
It's fear. It's fear of if you let go, that you will cease to exist. So it's not you, okay? It's that little last piece of your unconscious mind that's holding on to identity. Like what do I become? Who am I? Am I if I let go? It's that last little bit of identity on the unconscious mind's part that's holding on and grasping on for dear life.
It's got to
Okay,
be
so-
the unconscious mind, because
Yeah,
my daughter died 2 years ago, and I have no mental fear of death. In fact, I often, I wouldn't do anything to take steps, but I've often wake up in the morning going, oh, really again? So I mentally feel like I am so fine letting go, but I think it's somewhere deep, dark away from me that I can't access, has that fear that you're saying that I can't seem to figure out how to make peace with.
My sense right now is it's a control issue. And I'm not saying you're a control freak, okay? So please don't misunderstand. But it's a little
No, I
part
am.
of you. Okay, well then that clarifies. That's a little part of you left that's like, I can't let go because if I let go, I don't have control. And it's when I don't have control that I'm the most afraid. So can you practice being afraid? Can you practice letting go of fear instead of letting go of the attachment? So practice letting go of fear, and the attachment to control will start to go away. Because when you're not afraid, there's no need for control.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. I hope that helps. And, Cyrus knows how to get a hold of me. So you can always find me through Cyrus. Okay.
Well, you also have a
Awesome.
website too.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
But well, I'll mention that at the end. Does anyone else have any? Probably take a couple more, or we can finish here.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions, or comments, or thoughts for PJ or myself, even?
I do, but it's not. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, but sure.
A
Yeah.
little question in comparison to Sundays, but when you were told, or I don't know if you were told, but were you told that you were not going to make it past 7? Did your parents make you aware of that, or no?
Yeah, I was in the doctor's office at 4 years old. I
Okay.
stood at the fence crying in the morning one morning, and my mom came out and she's like, "Why are you crying?" And I saw some of my older friends going off to school.
Yeah.
And, I was crying and she's like, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Because I want to go to school too." And so she took me to the doctor and she said, "Well, if I take him, can I send him to school? Is it okay to send him to school?" And the doctor said, "If you send him to school, he'll die by second grade." So second grade is 7. That's why I always say 7.
Yeah.
He'll die by second grade. And my mom paused in the doctor's office. I can almost see it now, and I feel like I can feel it sometimes. And she paused in the doctor's office, obviously tearful. And she said, "Well, it's his life, and he gets to make that decision." So later on, she asked me, she said, what do you want? I said, "I want to go to school, Mommy." And she said, "Okay." And my grandmother's response was, my grandmother's response has been this a lot through my life. "You're going to let PJ do that? How are you going to let PJ do that? If you let him do that, isn't he going to die? Like, what happens if he dies?" My mom always said from that time when I was 4, she said, if he dies doing something he loves. He dies with friends, and he dies doing something he loves. So yeah, I made the decision to go to school. My mom let me, a 4-year-old, make that decision.
And I think in some way you made a
Wonderful.
decision that you're here for the
Thank you.
spiritual, that you're here with a spiritual purpose, and that you're not going to die at 7 or 8 or 9
Yeah.
or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. And so that's kept you in this world, and it's great. And I think a lot of people can learn about, the power, the level that there is a level of influence that we have over this reality, I think.
Well, that was that's my question.
Go.
What I was asking was, did you ever believe that you were going to die? Like at 7, like in your mind, did you say, okay, if I go to school, I am going to die? Did you believe that, or did you not believe it and just think like, of course, I will not. And I guess my question kind of keeps going because,
The question about like the level of attention that he had.
Well, I'm asking because, there's been a few people I know that have been sick and they never knew. And as soon as they know, one of them had cancer for years in their back and they didn't know that. And they find out and they died a week later. Um, there's certain instances, that just happens, right? Like they
Yes.
know and then they die. My
Yeah.
aunt, she just was diagnosed with some disease where I don't really know exactly what it's called, but her brain is shrinking and she's losing mobility and
Oh, my friend
um,
just died from that. My
yeah.
friend just died from that. Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
they said, you probably have 6 years from when it started.
Mhm.
And my mom was with her at the doctor's office like 3 weeks ago. And from then, she's gotten so much worse, like she can
Mhm.
hardly walk on her own. And there
Mhm.
has to be something mental about that because, I mean, she was having problems like dropping things and not being
Mhm.
coordinated and
Mhm.
being in pain, but she wasn't not able to walk. She wasn't needing assistance all the time. And yeah, I don't know. There has to be some correlation.
I absolutely 100% believe there's a correlation. Um, yes, I knew that I was supposed to die, but at 4 years old, do I really understand what that means? And I
Yeah,
was a spiritual little kid, so I remember literally, I remember being 5 and pointing, talking to my 2 4-year-old friends and saying, do you see that tree? God's in that tree. Do you see that bush? God's in that bush. Do you see that grass? God's in that
yeah,
grass, and God's in you and God's in me. That makes us brothers and sisters. I wasn't raised in the church or the synagogue or the temple or the mosque. That's just how I came. That's just how I was built. That's how I was born.
yeah,
And so maybe I didn't have that fear of death. Now, throughout my life, did I think I was going to die? I thought that there was a real possibility. Last year, excuse me, in March of 2019, I caught some massive virus. Then the doctors don't know what it was, and it stole 85% of my physical strength and a
yeah,
significant portion of my lung capacity. And there were moments when I would wake up and I couldn't breathe, and I was experiencing anxiety for the first time in my entire life. Where I remember sitting at the foot of my bed crying and saying, "I don't die like this. I can't die like this. This is
yeah,
not how I'm going to die. I don't die in a weak state." You know what I mean? So yes, I definitely believe that the mind can help to keep us alive. And I think that the thing is that there's a reason that I still live. And I want the
uh-uh,
most important piece of what I'm about to say, I think is really the answer to your question. Um, you hear people all the time in the business world say, you've got to know your why. You've got to know your why. You don't have to, just if you know your why, that'll pull you forward. You don't have to know how, you just have to know why. So my why is I just want to live. Like I love life. I
yeah,
love life. I'm so glad to be alive. And so these people um, that have died so quickly that and there are stories of police officers who believe that if they got shot they would die, and stories of police officers who believe that if they got shot they're like, it's just a bullet. Like I'm not going to die from a bullet. So
yeah,
one person gets shot and they die. One person
yeah,
gets shot 13 times and they live. Like what's the difference? The mindset, right? And so I would say that these people that you mentioned, and clearly there's a heart for both of them. I could feel it in you. That when they died so quickly, um, they gave up. They
yeah,
bought into it. They just said,
yeah,
"Oh, I'm gonna die." Instead of saying, "No, hold on." Like it's not like where's your mind, right? You're
yeah,
saying, "I'm gonna die." Not I'm not. I say I don't want to die. I say I want to live,
yeah,
right? But they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna die," and they just they give up because they put their belief in the doctors. Now I was in the hospital 17 times from sometimes months at a time before I was 12, like 17 times before I was 12. Um, and and there are a number of times when I could have died, but I wanted to live.
yeah,
So I don't put any credence. I don't put much credence into what doctors say. But
no,
the people who die quickly because a doctor says, "Hey, you've got this. You're likely to die in X number of days or whatever, or months or whatever." If they believe the doctor, then it's almost as if they literally let go. I wouldn't say they will themselves to death. I feel like they just go, okay, well, let me just let go. And
Yeah.
it's not I want to let go. I don't have any control over my life. I have control over my life. Even though I'm physically weak, I want something and I'm going to chase that crap down until I get it.
Yeah. And I think, like my aunt, unfortunately, she's been a very vain person all of her life. And, I mean, it's not all vanity, but, like what she told my mom, I'm not scared to die, but I'm scared to be in a wheelchair and not be able to move. And that made no sense to me because, there's you've been in a wheelchair and you're so happy. And so I think she just she doesn't even want to get there. So she'd rather just hurry up and get it over with.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're 100% right because they don't have any other image of what it's like. Some people say to me, oh my gosh, I don't know how you do it. I can never do what you do. But the truth is, if you've been born into this life with a mom like I had, you'd probably be exactly like me, right? Because we're very much the same. And the programming changes how we believe about our life and our world and our relationships. And so if you just change the programming, the doctor programmed her, you're going to die in this period of time. She bought
Yeah.
it, she believed it. And so consequently we saw the results, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be that way. You're so right. Like if you stop for a minute, and this is just my sense that I'm getting right now. If you stop for a minute and you just got quiet, and you just got still and you just went inside and listened for your own truth, for the truth, not even your own truth. Let me rephrase that. You listen for the truth. I'm tingling right now. And you listen for that truth and you connected with that truth. You could speak with authority into those people, but you can't come from your head. You have to reconnect with that power, with that presence, with that confidence, with that stillness. And then you could speak into those people life. And when you speak life into those people, you have the ability to pour into them options and choices that they then can choose. But when they don't know that they have options and choices, they accept and they roll over.
There's a great book I'm reading a little bit about that called Chris Beat Cancer.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
That's I think it applies to also many different sicknesses too. Just cancer, but it's a book I wanted to throw out there real quick. PJ, real quick before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you. I didn't know about this infection you had. That sure sounds an awful lot like the virus that shall not be named.
Yeah. Well, I think I had an early version of it. It almost killed me, and I have not regained from the loss of that physical strength. 85% of my physical strength. I've gained some back, but I used to have like a personal care assistant in the morning for 45 minutes. And at one point, a friend of mine, within the first month that I was down, first month and a half that I was down, a friend of mine came to stay with me for about 5 days. And he was helping me put on my underwear after he helped me shower. And he stopped for a minute and he looked at me and he said, listen to me. He said, you are effed up. And I said, thanks, man. That doesn't help. And he's like, he goes, you are so messed up. He said, you need 24 hours of care. Because at that time, I couldn't get into my own bed. I didn't know how. I couldn't lean forward and drink from a straw because I didn't know how anymore to breathe and drink from a straw. I couldn't be covered up because I wasn't strong enough to roll over. Even if you put a sheet on me, if I rolled over and the sheet like sort of wrapped me up like a little burrito, I would panic, and I never had anxiety or panic attacks because I couldn't move and I thought that I was stuck. And so all kinds of things happened from me. Oh, thank you, Sunday. I appreciate it. Super nice to meet you too. And so these crazy things occurred. And it was, I went from 45 minutes of personal care and assistance a day, living completely on my own, to 24 hours of care. Now I'm down to about an hour and a half to 2 hours of personal care in the morning. I could really use some help at night, but I don't want it. I don't want someone to help me at night. I'm staying in a hotel. I have to sleep on the floor because the bed is too soft for me to roll over. So what I do, and my personal care assistant was coming, but I said, look, I need to do this on my own. So I grab a pillow with my teeth. I drag it off. I drop it on my feet. I carry it over to a little corner, and basically where I'm sitting right now, a little corner in the hotel room. I put the pillow down. I go to another part of my room. I grab the, basically like not really a comforter, but sort of like a soft blanket or like a pad for the bed. I grab it in my teeth, pull that, drop that on my feet, pull it over, drop it on the pillow, fall out of my wheelchair. Basically, I mean, I lean forward, jump down on my knees, but I jump down on my knees on the pillow, and if I don't land right, I fall over. Now, for me to sit up, I have to sort of roll over with my butt in the air, and I have to push. I literally like push my forehead against the floor. Then I roll from my forehead to my nose. From my nose, I push my chin out and push up with my chin just to push my shoulders and my back and my hips back towards my heels. Then you do it again, and I do it again, and I do it again. It takes me about 10 times before I can get my hips back far enough that they're above my heels. Then I can sit up and sort of like get my legs crossed and sort of unroll the bedspread, and then just lay on it as best as I can in the pillow. And you know what? While I'm tired and I don't sleep as well as I used to, I'm still independent. And you know what? Like, I want to live, and I'm not willing to give up that independence. So I'll fight for it.
Well,
even though
PJ,
that
it wasn't that
blessed.
long ago that you had the virus that shall not be named. I think that's what it was. It's kind of like Voldemort in the He Who Shall Not Be Named on YouTube. It's the virus that shall not be named.
Right.
In fact, it wasn't that long ago, which means I think you can be back to pre-virus days. Coming up around the corner is my feeling. Because I mean, so. This is process for someone without a pre-existing condition like you have, but you are bouncing right back from it, and I'm bouncing back from it. And it's about mindset. And in some ways, based on the severity levels of it, you're doing a much, much better job than I am of bouncing back. And I think it's a mindset issue. And I think that's something that I am personally needing to work on. And in some ways, the virus that shall not be named is a massive test of mindset wherewithal. And I'm learning a lot from it, so, and it's extraordinary how much I'm learning based upon my experiences with it. And I wouldn't want to have not gotten it. We'll just say that. So it is phenomenal. But anyways, but it's phenomenal that you went through that, and I'm so glad that you've come back around again from that, and hopefully we can connect in person. In terms of me being a typhoid Mary carrier of it, I'm staying here at Aaron's place, and so he's the guinea pig. So if he doesn't catch anything from me, then I think, well, I mean, in reality, I mean, I think it's what I have is an autoimmune dysfunction caused from when I was sick. So I don't think I'm shedding viruses, but I've had to be super careful about that anyway. But hopefully we'll have a chance to meet up again. And as I think someone said in chat, was it Sunday or Keely? Sunday. Yeah, that week, they'd like to see us come back again. So who knows? Maybe we'll meet up in person sometime, since I'm back in Tucson, and maybe we'll talk again. So that said, PJ, how do people get a hold of you? And do you have anything in store coming up around the corner in your life, or your lectures or books or anything like that?
So I'm actually writing a book called Don't Give Up, Get Up. And I'm just now starting to promote a program called the Hero Project. And the marketing is really geared mostly towards STEM men and shy guys. But I really want to open up the Hero Project for anyone who wants to build more confidence. Because what I'm finding in my own exploration is that confidence isn't everything, or lack of confidence isn't everything. And we either have confidence because of our belief systems, or we lack confidence because of our belief systems. And I really want people to have more confidence, because the more confidence you have, the more delicious your life can be. And so that's what I'm building. It's called the Hero Project. And you can find it at heroproject.pjswisdom.com. Again, Hero Project, one word, .pjs, like PJs, wisdom, WISDOM.com, or you can just simply find me at pjswisdom.com and connect with me there. Okay.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, PJ, for coming out.
Thank you.
I'm really great. I hope this was a benefit to people watching. And yeah, and so yes, pjswisdom.com, and also, of course, if you want to get involved with Afterlife Topics, we have the Facebook group Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. We have the Reddit page. Of course, we have the YouTube channel. We have afterlifetopics.com, and you always pick up books like Understanding Life After Death of the Afterlife and Beyond on Amazon. So to those watching, thanks everybody, and to those patrons, thank you for supporting the work, and thank you for coming out. And to PJ, special thank you. And I'm so glad that you're back on, back in better shape these days. I didn't even realize that's what happened to you. It blows my mind. So, all right. And I guess.
Can I leave everybody with one statement?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I believe that change is inevitable. Transformation is a choice. Change is inevitable. Transformation is a choice. Okay. Make that conscious choice, because that's a space of empowerment. And I love you guys. Even if I don't know you, I have love for you. Cyrus, thank you so much for letting me be on here.
Okay.
Great.
I'm going to bounce
Thank
out, but
you.
the room is still open. Some of the people hang out in the room, but I'm going to take a walk or bounce out. So I'll see you guys next time.